Picture the heat first. August. The Syrian plain of Yarmouk, scorched, windless, and merciless. The year is 636 AD. The land itself seems to recoil as two worlds collide. On one side stands the Byzantine Empire, nearly 30,000 soldiers, hardened veterans of decades of war against Sasanian Persia. They are tired, underpaid, and stretched thin, but they carry the weight of centuries, Roman law, imperial tradition, and the last great army of the ancient Mediterranean world. Behind them lie Syria, Palestine, and the eastern provinces that once fed Constantinople itself. On the other stands Khalid ibn al-Walid, Saif Allah, the sword of Islam, commanding roughly 20,000 Rashidun warriors. Fewer in number, but faster, leaner, united by belief, discipline, and a doctrine of relentless maneuver. These men are not defending an old order. They are building a new one. The sky darkens with arrows. Dust and blood choke the air. Cavalry crashes into infantry like a sandstorm, smashing against stone. For 6 relentless days, the battlefield churns. Lines advance, bend, reform, and shatter. Byzantine heavy infantry struggles to pin down an enemy that refuses to stand still. Khalid's cavalry strikes the flanks again and again, probing, feinting, encircling, until exhaustion does what swords cannot. Then it breaks. Byzantine cohesion collapses. Retreat becomes panic. Entire formations are driven into ravines along the Yarmouk's edge, cut down or crushed as escape turns into slaughter. Command disintegrates. The imperial army of the East ceases to exist. When the dust finally settles, Syria and the Levant are lost in a single catastrophic defeat. This is the Battle of Yarmouk, the thunderclap that shattered Byzantine dominance in the Near East and unleashed one of the most explosive expansions in world history. From 634 to 717, Arab armies surge outward like a tidal wave. Damascus falls. Jerusalem capitulates. Egypt, Byzantium's richest province, is severed forever. Raiding columns pour into Anatolia, burning cities, emptying countryside, probing ever deeper into the empire's heartland. Each year the frontier shrinks. Each season the pressure grows. Twice the unthinkable happens. Constantinople itself is besieged. The greatest city on earth, ringed by walls, chains, and fire, standing as the final barrier between the Caliphate and Europe. The Byzantine Empire teeters on the edge of annihilation, its survival hanging by preparation, weather, alliances, and a weapon no enemy can counter. Yet, resilience hardens, strategy adapts, fire answers steel, the tide slows, then finally breaks. This is the story of the early Caliphate's rise, the conquest of Syria, the devastation of Anatolia, the epic sieges of Constantinople, and the desperate struggle that ultimately halts Islamic expansion into Europe. Guided by battle maps of a shattered frontier and the words of Byzantine witnesses who endured the storm. Hold fast, the tomb. Conquest has begun. Part 1. Setup. The rise of Islam and Byzantine weakness. Rewind the clock to 622 AD. The Byzantine Empire, Eastern Rome's last great survivor, still stretches from the Balkans to Syria, from the Aegean to the deserts of Arabia. On maps, it looks immense. On parchment, it looks eternal. In reality, it is bleeding. For 26 brutal years, Byzantium has fought the Sassanid Persian Empire in a war of total exhaustion. This is not a border conflict. It is an imperial death struggle. Cities are sacked. Provinces change hands repeatedly. Armies are annihilated and rebuilt, only to be destroyed again. The imperial treasury is drained to nothing. Tax systems fracture. Entire regions are left depopulated. By the early 620s, the empire is close to collapse. Then Emperor Heraclius does the unthinkable. Against all expectations, he launches a daring counteroffensive deep into Persian territory. Campaigning through Anatolia and Mesopotamia, he shatters the Persian field armies and forces the enemy into submission. In 628, Persia sues for peace. Byzantine lands are restored. Heraclius marches triumphantly into Jerusalem, returning the true cross to the holy city amid celebration and awe. It is one of the greatest recoveries in Roman history, and it nearly kills the empire. Victory comes at a terrible cost. Byzantium is spent. Its veteran soldiers are dead, crippled, or dispersed. Frontier garrisons are skeletal. Fortresses stand unrepaired. The population is war-weary and overtaxed. Syria, Palestine, and Egypt, recently reconquered, are barely reintegrated and deeply resentful after years of Persian occupation. The empire has won the war, but it has no strength left for another. And while Byzantium struggles to breathe again, a new force is rising beyond its southern frontier. In Arabia, a political and religious revolution is unfolding. By 632, the Prophet Muhammad has unified the fractious tribes of the peninsula under Islam, forging a son. Cohesion Arabia has never known. After his death, leadership passes to the Rashidun caliphs, first Abu Bakr, then Umar ibn al-Khattab, men who channel that unity outward with startling speed. They raise armies unlike anything Byzantium expects. Forces of 20 to 40,000, organized, disciplined, and highly mobile. Bedouin cavalry hardened by desert warfare. Light infantry capable of marching where imperial armies cannot. Commanders who prize maneuver, intelligence, and relentless pressure. These soldiers fight for plunder, land, and faith, but above all, for momentum. In Constantinople, the threat is misunderstood. To Byzantine officials, these are merely Arab raiders, a familiar nuisance from the desert fringes, dangerous but manageable. The empire has crushed such incursions before. This time is different. The stakes are absolute. Stop the Muslim advance, or lose the eastern provinces forever. The first blow falls in Syria, and as the desert winds rise, the sands of the Levant begin to shift. Part 2. Conquest of Syria and the Levant. Yarmouk's Cataclysm, 634 to 641. The year is 634 AD. What begins as a raid becomes an invasion. Under Caliph Abu Bakr, Muslim forces strike into southern Syria with speed and intent. Light columns probing Byzantine defenses, severing communications, and forcing imperial commanders to react rather than plan. These are not random incursions. They are calculated tests of a weakened frontier. Then command passes to one man. Khalid ibn al-Walid arrives. Already legendary for his victories against Persia and Arabia's rival tribes, Khalid, Saif Allah, the Sword of God, immediately reshapes the campaign. He unifies scattered Arab armies, coordinates movements across vast distances, and turns maneuver into a weapon. His troops march where Byzantine generals believe armies cannot survive. In July 634, the test becomes a verdict. At the Battle of Ajnadayn, near modern-day Ramla, Arab forces collide with a Byzantine field, army tasked with holding Palestine. The result is devastating. Khalid's cavalry shatters the imperial line. Byzantine command collapses. The army disintegrates. For the first time, a Roman field force is annihilated by the armies of Islam. The road into the Levant lies open. Cities begin to fall, quietly at first, then in succession. Garrisons withdraw. Supplies vanish. Imperial authority erodes by the week. Yet Byzantium is not ready to concede its richest eastern provinces without one final, decisive stand. That stand comes at Yarmouk. August 636 AD. On the windswept plateau above the Yarmouk River, Emperor Heraclius commits everything he has left. Estimates vary, but as many as 40,000 Byzantine troops are assembled. Armenians, Slavs, regular Roman units, and Ghassanid Arab allies, all drawn together to defend 6 centuries of Roman rule in the Near East. It is a multi-ethnic imperial army, powerful on paper, and brittle in reality. Opposing them stand roughly 20,000 Rashidun soldiers, fewer in number but unified in command, hardened by campaigning, and led by Khalid with absolute authority. There are no divided generals, no rival commands, no hesitation. For 6 brutal days, the battlefield churns. Infantry clash in suffocating heat. Arrows darken the sky. Dust blinds men and horses alike. Khalid's cavalry roams constantly, hammering flanks, cutting off units, exploiting every weakness. Feigned retreats draw Byzantine formations forward, stretching their line, draining their strength, pulling them toward disaster. Fatigue sets in. Coordination falters. Morale cracks. Then it happens. The Byzantine line breaks. What begins as an orderly withdrawal becomes panic. Units lose contact. Command dissolves. Entire formations are driven toward ravines and river gorges, where escape becomes slaughter. Men drown. Horses fall. Standards vanish. By the end, the imperial army is destroyed. Yarmouk is not a defeat. It is a catastrophe for the Eastern. Roman military presence in Syria ceases to exist in a single week. The consequences are immediate and irreversible. Damascus falls in 636. Jerusalem, after a prolonged siege, surrenders in 638. Its keys handed over peacefully, even as Heraclius orders the true cross removed from the city forever. By 641, the verdict is final. Syria and the Levant are lost. Byzantine forces retreat north, abandoning the open plains and withdrawing behind the Taurus Mountains. As they go, they burn crops, empty towns, and depopulate entire regions, creating a scorched earth buffer between empire and caliphate. But the damage is already done. Yarmouk has blown the gates open. The empire has lost its wealthiest provinces, its recruiting grounds, its ancient cities, and its strategic depth. What remains is a wounded state clinging to Anatolia and the sea. Now, the road leads north, into Anatolia, and the raids are about to begin. Part 3. Raids into Anatolia, the Frontier Wars and Buffer Zones, 642 to 717. After Yarmouk, the Arab tide does not pause. It accelerates. By 642, the war moves north, beyond Syria, beyond the Levant, into the mountainous heart of the Byzantine world. Under Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan, governor of Syria and future caliph, Muslim armies cross the Taurus passes and spill into Anatolia, the empire's last great manpower reservoir. These are not armies of occupation. They are instruments of exhaustion. Fast-moving cavalry columns strike deep, bypassing strong points, smashing towns and vanishing before imperial forces can respond. Amorium, one of Anatolia's most important cities, is sacked. Cappadocia is ravaged. Villages are emptied. Churches stripped. Populations flee toward the coast or behind fortress walls. The message is clear. Nowhere is safe. The Byzantines adapt or perish. Imperial commanders abandon the idea of holding every city. Instead, they execute a grim strategy of survival. Border towns are evacuated. Fields are burned. Wells are poisoned. From Cilicia to the Taurus Mountains, the empire deliberately creates a wasteland, a dead strip between civilizations. A frontier is born. The Thughur. This is no peaceful border. It is a permanent war zone. Fortresses staring across empty valleys, patrols hunting patrols, ambush answering ambush. No man's land stretches for miles, where neither empire truly rules and both bleed continuously. The conflict settles into a brutal rhythm. Every summer, the Saifa begins. Arab raiding armies ride north with the campaigning season, plundering, capturing slaves, stripping livestock, burning what cannot be carried away. Every winter, they withdraw south, leaving devastation behind. The goal is not conquest, but attrition. To drain Byzantium year by year, raid by raid. The empire responds in kind. Fortifications multiply. Old Roman strongholds are repaired. New mountain castles rise. Roads are militarized. Garrisons become permanent. From this crucible emerges a new class of soldier. The Akratai, elite frontier warriors who live their entire lives on the edge of annihilation. Farmer soldiers by necessity, killers by survival. They form Byzantium's first and last line of defense. Key blows punctuate the long struggle. 654, Muslim fleets strike the Aegean. Rhodes is captured and stripped. Cyprus is repeatedly raided, its population divided and taxed by both empires. 660s to 680s. Deeper thrusts into Anatolia test imperial defenses, probing routes toward the western plateau. Cities tremble, but the core holds. 663 to 689. Raids grow bolder, more coordinated, supported increasingly by naval power. Yet despite the devastation, something remarkable happens. Byzantium does not collapse. Anatolia bends, but it does not break. The empire reorganizes around defense. Themes harden into military districts. Soldiers settle the land they defend. War becomes institutionalized, and all of it, every raid, every burned field, every skirmish in the mountains, builds toward something larger. A final gamble. A decisive blow. Because beyond the frontier lies a prize unlike any other. Constantinople, the greatest city on earth, the key to Europe. The wall history must break or turn away from. The thunder of conquest is rising. The Queen of Cities waits. And soon, the war will come to her walls. Part 4. Sieges of Constantinople. The Umayyads' ultimate gambles. 674 to 678 and 717 to 718. At last, the war narrows to a single, incandescent target. All roads, all raids, all burned provinces lead here. Constantinople, the greatest city on earth, the hinge of continents, the fortress that controls the Bosphorus, and with it, the gateway between Asia and Europe. To the Caliphate, its fall would mean nothing less than dominion over the Christian world. To Byzantium, its survival is existence itself. The first siege, 674 to 678. Fire on the sea. The first great attempt comes under Caliph Muawiyah, architect of Umayyad power. Year after year, Arab armies and fleets descend on the city, establishing forward bases along the Sea of Marmara. This is not a single assault, but a grinding, seasonal siege, an unprecedented effort to choke Constantinople into submission. Up to 80,000 men and a powerful navy press the attack. But they meet something new. From Byzantine warships bursts Greek fire, a weapon so terrifying it seems supernatural. Liquid flame pours from bronze siphons, igniting enemy ships on contact, burning across water itself. Entire squadrons vanish in moments. Panic spreads through the fleet. Nature joins the defense. Storms shatter supply lines. Disease ravages the camps. Year after year, the attackers bleed strength, while the city endures behind the Theodosian walls. In 678, the Umayyads withdraw in defeat. The result is seismic. Byzantium forces the Caliphate into its first major diplomatic concession. An annual tribute is paid to Constantinople. Moment, the empire breathes again. But the war is not over. The second siege, 717 to 718. The end of the advance. 4 decades later, the Caliphate returns, stronger, larger, and determined to finish the task. This time, there will be no half measures. Under Maslama ibn Abd al-Malik, brother of the reigning caliph, an invasion force of staggering scale assembles. Up to 120,000 troops march through Thrace. At sea, an armada, possibly 2,000 or more ships, moves to seal the Bosphorus and starve the city into surrender. Constantinople is encircled. To the world, its fall seems inevitable. But on the throne now sits Leo III, a soldier emperor forged by frontier war. He has prepared meticulously. Granaries are full, civilians expelled. The fleet is ready. Chains block the Golden Horn, and Greek fire waits, refined, perfected and devastating. The siege collapses piece by piece. At sea, Byzantine dromons annihilate Umayyad fleets in repeated engagements. Reinforcements from Egypt and Syria are intercepted and burned. Some crews defect outright, sabotaging their own ships. On land, Leo's alliance with Khan Tervel of the Bulgars proves decisive. Bulgar cavalry slash into the Umayyad rear, slaughtering foragers and supply units. Thousands die far from the walls they came to conquer. Then winter descends, one of the coldest in memory. Snow buries the camps, food disappears, horses are eaten, disease spreads unchecked. Men freeze where they stand. What battle does not claim, hunger does. By summer 718, the invaders are finished. Maslama orders a retreat. Storms rip through the fleeing fleet in the Aegean, drowning tens of thousands more. Of the vast armada that arrived, only fragments return. Modern estimates place Umayyad losses as catastrophic. Tens of thousands, possibly over 90,000 dead. The Caliphate has hurled its full weight against Constantinople and shattered itself. The halt. This is the turning point. Never again will an Islamic army come so close to conquering Constantinople by force. The westward expansion of the Caliphate stalls permanently. The frontier hardens. The dream of Europe through the Bosphorus dies beneath the walls. Byzantium survives, battered, scarred, but alive. From Yarmouk to Anatolia, from raid to siege, the Caliphate had surged like a tidal wave. Unstoppable, triumphant, relentless. And here, against stone, fire, winter, and endurance, it finally breaks. The walls stand, the empire endures, and history turns, not on an open battlefield, but beneath the unbroken towers of Constantinople. Part 5. Aftermath and Legacy. Halt of expansion and Byzantine resurgence. The failure before Constantinople does not merely end a siege. It ends an era of momentum. For the Umayyad Caliphate, the shock is decisive. The sieges, especially the disaster of 717 to 718, shatter the myth of inevitable conquest. The armies that had rolled from Arabia to the Atlantic and the Indus have met a wall they cannot breach. Expansion into Anatolia stalls permanently. Resources are drained. Veterans are lost. Confidence fractures. Within a generation, internal dissent, regional revolts, and political exhaustion tear at the foundations of Umayyad power, culminating in the Abbasid Revolution of 757. The Caliphate survives, but transformed, redirected, and chastened. The road into Europe is closed. For Byzantium, survival becomes resurgence. Emperor Leo III emerges not simply as the defender of Constantinople, but as the architect of recovery. His controversial iconoclast reforms, born from crisis, aim to discipline wealth, centralize authority, and refocus the empire on military survival. The theme system hardens Anatolia into a fortified heartland, populated by soldier farmers who live, fight, and endure on the frontier. What had been a collapsing border becomes a shield. Arab raids do not cease, but they are contained. Over the following centuries, Byzantium adapts. Fortresses multiply. Intelligence networks expand. Frontier warfare becomes calculated, ritualized, survivable. By the 10th century, under emperors like Nikephoros II Phocas, John Tzimiskes, and Basil II, the empire goes back on the offensive. Between 920 and 976, large swaths of Anatolia and the eastern frontier are reclaimed. The once besieged empire becomes the aggressor again. The legacy is immense and civilizational. Christianity's eastern heartlands endure, preserving institutions, theology, and culture that might otherwise have vanished. Byzantium stands as Europe's eastern shield, buying centuries of time for the development of medieval Christendom. Greek fire enters legend, feared by enemies, revered by defenders, a symbol of technological edge and strategic ingenuity. The frontier wars forge doctrine, resilience over glory, defense over reckless expansion, preparation over faith in inevitability. These events redraw the map of the medieval world. They define the boundary between Islamic and Christian spheres for centuries. They demonstrate that even the most explosive expansion has limits, that logistics, climate, alliances, and discipline matter as much as belief and courage. From the dust-choked plains of Yarmouk, through the burned valleys of Anatolia, to the ice-bound camps beneath the walls of Constantinople, history delivers its verdict. Empires may surge like tides. Faith may drive armies across continents. But walls, strategy, and endurance can still decide the fate of the world. Constantinople stands. Byzantium endures. And the course of Europe, and history itself, is forever altered. Conclusion. Lessons from the edge of empires. The rise of the Caliphate, the fall of Syria, the burning raids across Anatolia, and the sieges of Constantinople reveal a hard, enduring truth about history. Victory is never decided by numbers alone. It is forged by preparation, adaptability, leadership, and the ability to endure when collapse seems inevitable. At Yarmouk, brilliance in maneuver and cohesion shattered an exhausted empire in a single week. In Anatolia, relentless pressure tested Byzantium to its limits, stripping provinces bare and turning whole regions into wastelands of war. And before the walls of Constantinople, the world held its breath, because there, expansion met resistance that refused to yield. The Byzantines survived not because they were stronger, but because they learned faster. They adapted their armies, reshaped their society, weaponized technology, and forged alliances when isolation meant death. Greek fire, fortified walls, disciplined logistics, and strategic patience became their answer to overwhelming force. What could not be stopped in open battle was halted by endurance. The Caliphate, for its part, left an indelible mark on history. Its expansion reshaped the Near East, North Africa, and the Mediterranean forever. But even the most dynamic and successful conquests have limits. Constantinople proved that momentum can be broken, and that a single city, prepared and resolute, can redirect the fate of continents. These are not just ancient stories of swords and walls. They are lessons in leadership under pressure, in resilience against catastrophe, in knowing when to strike and when to endure. From emperors and generals to modern leaders facing overwhelming challenges, the echoes remain the same. Empires rise, tides surge, but survival belongs to those who adapt. So which moment struck you most? The lightning devastation of Yarmouk, the brutal frontier wars of Anatolia, or the fire-lit seas before Constantinople's unbroken walls? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of history's greatest struggles, make sure to like, subscribe, and ring the bell for more epic journeys into the past. History waits for no one, but its lessons endure forever.